Good morning from the European Court of Auditors in Luxembourg, and let me warmly welcome you to our online discussion today. For those of you who are with us for the first time, we are of course the EU's financial watchdog, and we're absolutely thrilled that so many could actually be with us here today. Now today we will be talking about lessons to be learned from the EU's Pandemic Recovery Fund, in other words the EU's Recovery and Resilience Facility. As we all know, this is the 650 billion euro instrument called the RRF. And we will also be talking about the implications for the EU's cohesion policy, which, as you know, is also a very important financial vehicle to support the EU's policies. So we have on the table the topics that you are all very familiar with and that we have all audited them over these years. Now, we would like to provide you an update from the auditor's point of view in this crucial time. Now, we have the pleasure of having with us today three members of the European Court of Auditors. Mrs. Ivana Maletic on my left. She is the member of the European Court of Auditors Chamber or Department 4 that deals with audits in the area of regulation of markets and competitive economy. So great to have you here, Ivana.
Hello, good day, everybody.
And we have great pleasure also having with us today Mr. Jörg Christian Petrovic on Ivana's left. He is the member of the European Court of Auditors Chamber 5 that deals with audits in the area of financing and administering the union. So great to have you here, Jörg.
Hello, Damian. Hello, everybody.
And last but not least, on my right, we have the pleasure of having with us today Mr. Alejandro Blanco Fernandez, who is the member also of the European Court of Auditors in Chamber 2 that deals with audits in the area of investment, growth and cohesion and, of course, inclusion. Great to have you here, Alejandro.
Thank you, Damian. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody.
So all three of our members have done very important work in the area of the RRF and the cohesion. So we're really happy to have them with us here today. Just a few words from my side before we kick off. We will start with three brief presentations from each of them. Then we will have a few questions via a tool called Slido, which you can already start using. And afterwards, we will also take a few questions directly from you, either via Teams or if you want to use your camera and microphone, or via Slido if you just want to put it in writing to our speakers. So on this cue, please mute your microphones for the moment. Teams chat is closed for comments. It's only available for speaking on the camera, and Slido is already available for any comments or questions you may want to have. So on this note, let's already turn the tables and test your active listening. I will put the first question on Slido just to test if it works for everyone. Regarding the lessons learned from the RRF and their implications for cohesion and other EU spending in the future, are you option A, cheerful, B, optimistic, C, cautious, or D, concerned? This is just to measure the mood of the virtual room opposite to where we sit. We'll give a few seconds. I think the majority is going towards cautious.
Yeah, no cheerful.
Okay, I think we can settle now for the results. The least of the participants, as I can see, are cheerful about it. About 15% optimistic, about a third concerned, and half is cautious. So on this cue, Ivana, I will also ask the same question to all of our speakers in one word. What would you say in one word? Are you cheerful, optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
Well, I agree with the audience, so I'm also cautious, but optimistic in a way that I think that we should change and modernize European financing. So I hope that we will find our way through.
So cautiously optimistic in two words.
Yeah.
Jörg.
I would also go for the cautious, like the majority of the audience, being practically just a year away from the end and knowing the current results, I would go like the cautious. Yeah.
So cautious on this side is winning for the moment too. And Alejandro?
I could say that I would like to be more optimistic because I think that cohesion policy has gone through a lot during the past programming periods, and I think that if we incorporate the positive elements or some of the positive elements of the RRF, we would have a great cohesion policy in the future. So I would vote for optimistic.
Okay, well, very good. We have a tie here between cautious and optimistic. So I'm really looking forward to our presentations and debates later on. And on this cue, Ivana, you've led a number of audits on the RRF, including on the absorption, on labor market reforms very recently. And just very recently, you were in charge, together with York, on the RRF review that we published a good month ago. So can you tell us essentially, you have also brought it here with you, exactly. Can you tell us to what extent is the RRF really a performance-based instrument? This is a perennial question. There are different sides to the debate, so we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, this is one of our main messages, that RRF is actually not performance-based instrument, and we found different weaknesses in relation to that, which I will explain through the presentation. So
very good.
It's not performance-based instrument.
Okay, we start on this premise. Very good. Looking forward to looking through the presentation together with you.
Thank you. So I can start. So thank you, Damian, once again. Together with my colleagues, Jorg and Alejandro, I would also like to welcome you all to this online discussion on future of EU financing, especially in light of the RRF review and midterm revision of the cohesion policy. In May, we published our review on the Recovery and Resilience Facility, presenting both its design and specific features, as well as its implementation up to the end of 2024. This review brings together the key findings. You can go another slide further. The key findings from our 10 special reports, 3 annual reports. You can move the slide. So you can see 10 special reports, 3 annual reports, 2 opinions, and based on that, we prepared our review. Our aim is to contribute to the ongoing debate about the post-2027 multi-financial framework, particularly regarding any future instruments that use financing not linked to costs. So our main message is very clear regarding the RRF. While the RRF has played a crucial role in the EU's post-pandemic recovery, our work has identified several weaknesses, particularly in terms of performance, accountability, and transparency. You can see on the screen our key messages, key points. First one, we already said that RRF is not a performance-based instrument. Now I will not read all of them, because during the presentation from me and Jorg, you will see all of them and short explanations. So now we can start with the fact that RRF is not performance-based instrument. Please, if you can move the slide. So why we are saying this? First, the RRF focuses with milestones and targets on progress in implementation rather than on performance. The fact is that RRF is a new model of financing tested in such a large scale, because this is financing not linked to cost, but this financing not linked to cost does not automatically make it a performance-based instrument. Performance requires some other elements to be put in place and to be able to be assessed, like effectiveness, which is achieving tangible results. So we have to be able to assess results, and in the case of the RRF, it's just steps in implementation, and efficiency. And efficiency is about making the best use of resources to reach objectives. But in order to assess efficiency, we need also elements related to the deployment of resources, which is linked to the actual cost. And the fact is, what you can see on the slide, that Commission does not collect or use information on actual cost. And we can see also in the member states from our audits that in some member states we can easily find actual costs related to the RRF, in some we cannot. So basically, we don't have these 2 elements in order to assess effectiveness and efficiency. Also, regarding fulfillment of milestones and targets, they often relate, as I said, to steps in implementation or to inputs, outputs. Outputs such as the number of buildings renovated or kilometers of railway built, or even just inputs like the amount of money spent. Information on actual results, however, is very limited. Moreover, the European Commission, as I said, does not collect data on actual costs, making it impossible to assess the RRF's efficiency or value for money. As a result, it is unclear what citizens have received for their money. Because neither effectiveness nor efficiency can be properly assessed, we conclude that the RRF is not a performance-based instrument. Any costs you see on the scoreboard across the 6 pillars and areas such as green transition, digitalization, cohesion, competitiveness, education, health, is based on artificial calculation of unit value for milestones and targets. This is why we have this another message from the RRF that it is not clear what we got for money. So there is no indication of whether actual costs are significantly higher or lower than these estimates. And basically everything what you see is based on this artificial calculation of unit value, and you cannot really see how much of billions of euros was spent in different areas. Now, another difficulty with the RRF is related to the transparency. Transparency is essential for accountability. Not only is there a lack of information on actual cost, but we also do not have a complete picture of who the final recipients of RRF funds are. When member states publish lists of the 100 largest finance recipients, and you all probably saw all these lists, these are often ministries, regional and local governments, agencies, and public enterprises. But the purpose of these lists is to clearly identify the true beneficiaries, the end users of the funds. And we also would like to know whether funds are being concentrated among a few private companies or large consortia. But now here with these lists, we only see public entities. To ensure accountability and understand where the funds are truly going, we need harmonized definitions and transparent reporting on real end users of the RRF funds. Another weakness identified in our audit work is that although the RRF was intended to boost reforms and address country-specific recommendations, the plan only partially addressed them. You all know that RRF was introduced as an instrument which will help and support implementation of country-specific recommendations, which were not implemented for a long time since the European semester was introduced in 2011. For example, in our audit on labor market reforms, we found that 1/3 of country-specific recommendations were not covered by any measures in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So imagine, 1/3 was not covered at all. Another 1/3 were only marginally or partially addressed, and just 1/3 were largely or fully addressed. So only 1/3 largely or fully addressed. And I have to remind you that the RRF regulation requires all or a significant subset of country-specific recommendations to be addressed. Then another point is related to the delays, because RRF was supposed to be very quick, but RRF is also facing delays, which pose risk to the completion of funded measures and also jeopardize the achievement of the objectives based on the fulfillment of milestones and targets. You can see that at the end of 2024, 42% of the funds have been disbursed, and only 28% of milestones and targets had been satisfactorily fulfilled. This means that 72% of milestones and targets still need to be completed by August 2026. And now, based on the newest guideline from the Commission, we can see that by the end of May this year, only this percentage of milestones and targets increased only to 31%. So we didn't move a lot in the next 5 months, and in 1 year, member states together with the Commission have to do 70% of milestones and targets. Furthermore, as shown in this figure, the disbursement of funds is not necessarily proportional to the milestones and targets achieved, nor does it reflect their relative importance. And also now at the end, as you can see, a high proportion of measures and their associated milestones and targets are scheduled for completion in the last year. This raises the risk that a significant share of RRF funding may be paid out without member states having fully completed the corresponding investments, projects, and reforms. And my last slide. Another aspect of the RRF is the significant variation among member states in terms of the size of the allocation, ranging from less than 1% of GDP to over 5 or even 10% in some cases. The timing of implementation has also varied, which is reflected in the number of payment requests planned and submitted, as well as in the different levels of delays as shown on the slide. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to you, Ivana. So dear audience, if you had any trouble following the slides, you will also, of course, be able to find them in our reports, in particular, the latest review on the RRF that we have published. Now, Ivana, I have a question for you. You were talking about all these delays and the fact that most milestones and targets must still be fulfilled in the final year of the RRF's implementation. Now, do you think that the Commission, together with Member States, actually has sufficient capacity to check, approve, and pay for all this within such a short period of time, really?
This is a very interesting question because it not only that it will be very difficult to finalize all the projects, but also how quickly the Commission can assess satisfactory fulfillment of all milestones and targets, having in mind that now, as of May this year, they still have to do 70%, 69% of milestones and targets. So first bottleneck will be definitely Commission in this assessment of the milestones and targets, but also it will not be easy for the member states now to process all the payment requests with all milestones and targets and prepare management declarations, and also auditors, work for auditors in the member states will not be simple, and everything will be very, very challenging because in a very, very short time now everything has to be done, and it is really not easy to expect that this can happen in practice.
All right, so still cautiously optimistic, if I remember, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Now here, more cautious.
Very cautious. Thank you, Ivana. Now we will move to the next presentation. I'd like to turn to my fellow compatriot, Jörg Christian Petrovic. Jörg, you have also led a number of audits on the RRF, in particular on the NGEU, so Next Generation EU Debt Management, as well as authoring our recent review on the RRF together with Ivana. So can you tell us more about the RRF's control and accountability framework? What worked and what essentially needs to be improved?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the floor. And thank you, Ivana, for presenting the first 6 key messages. My intention in this initial presentation is to present the other 5 findings, key messages that we would like to convey to the audience. So the first one, its payment conditions are not clearly defined. The lack of clarity in the RRF legal framework and poorly defined milestones and targets led to different interpretations of the legal requirements, contributing to the frequency of the errors we found. For example, the RRF regulation provides that only measures started from 1st of February 2020 onward are eligible, but do not set criteria for what is meant by the start of the measure. The Commission's guidelines provide that the investment starts when the first related costs are incurred. In the court's view, however, the action starts when the first legal commitment, such as contract or financing decision, is made. The next one is that there is a risk of overlapping with other EU funds. The RRF covers objectives in a wide range of policy areas, which increases the risk of overlaps with other EU instruments. The same achievement should not be financed twice from the EU budget, either by a cost-based instrument or by non-cost-based instruments. In our recent special report on double funding, for example, we found that instruments with financing non-linked to costs may have a higher risks of double funding, especially when used in combination with other EU programs, funding similar actions over the same time horizons. The next message is that assurance that control systems adequately protect EU financial interests is insufficient. The regulation allows member states to use their existing national management and control systems for the purpose of checking compliance with EU and national rules. In our assessment of a sample of 5 countries, we found that these systems were very different. For example, Croatia relied on the same system used for structural funds, as France and Spain relied on their existing national control systems. Italy and Czechia used a combination of national systems, structural fund systems, and controls developed specifically for the RRF. The Commission relied mainly on member state systems to prevent, detect, and correct serious irregularities and non-compliance with EU and national rules, although there were weaknesses in these systems. We also found that at the start of the RRF control systems were not in place in all member states. The next message goes that the fund's recovery is only possible in specific cases. The Commission cannot make corrections for individual breaches of public procurement rules unless they are serious irregularities such as corruption and fraud. This means that RRF payments can be made in full even when public procurement irregularities have occurred. Moreover, corrective actions vary considerably across member states. In Croatia, for example, they apply similar flat rate corrections as in the structural funds, but in Spain, there are no penalties in case for the irregularities. Some member states do not recover RRF funds from final recipients in case of irregularities in the procurement. But even when member states do recover these funds, they are not returned to the EU budget. We also found that by the end of 2023, the member states had not reported a single case of suspected fraud in their management declarations. This stands in contrast to the reports of the European Public Prosecutor's Office. EPO reported that by the end of 2024, they had 311 cases opened on the Next Generation EU, of which 307 were on RRF. This was 70% of the fraud cases, and they represented in total 2.8 billion euros. This could lead us to conclusions that the control systems are working, but this is not the case in all countries. Most of the cases mentioned by EPO are from Italy, where they have an excellent cooperation by Guardia di Finanza, which we could say it's a very good example of the good practice. For the message, our last message that I would like to convey, it's that borrowing brings risks. The debt created to finance the Recovery and Resilience Facility grants will be repaid from the EU budget. While the Commission has made a proposal to introduce new own resources to finance debt repayment by early 2023, no political agreement has yet been reached. So far, it is not yet clear from which sources we will repay the debt when the repayment starts in 2028. This, combined with a significant increase in the costs of funding for the NGU borrowing compared to initial estimates, will put significant pressure on the future EU budgets and creates additional risks. The RRF debt repayment will last all the way to 2058. This means that RRF will have to be paid back largely by the next generation of EU taxpayers, as the name Next Generation EU suggests. To conclude, let me summarize what are the lessons learned. What are we suggesting to be done? Link founding to result. Define payment conditions in a harmonized way. Avoid overlaps with different EU programs. Provide timely and transparent information on progress. Clearly define supervision on control responsibility and check control systems before payments are made. Made recovery possible in all cases where funds are not used properly. For example, in cases of public procurement breaches or in a case of reversals. Match instruments time frame with the likely time to achieve its objectives. Disbursements should reflect the progress, and in case of borrowing, mitigate interest rate risks and determine resources for the repayment of the debt in advance. Thank you very much, and back to you, Damian.
Thank you very much, dear York. This was very elaborate. Lots of words, of course, also lots of text on the slides, which we hope you'll find very useful. And again, you will find these particularly in our recent review on the RRF. Very neatly presented. Now, our messages on the weaknesses on the RRF, as well as the main lessons to be learned, are clear, and thank you again for stressing them so neatly. Now, given all the challenges, do you think it would be easier and somehow less administratively burdensome to retain the reimbursement of costs as the financing model of the future or for the future, rather than moving towards a performance-based approach? And we've heard before already what we consider is a performance-based approach or not.
Well, I would like to say that the performance-based approach is a step in the right directions. Maybe the audience who has already read the report got the feeling that we are very critical about this approach. But the intention of our review was not to be critical about the instrument. The intention was to show how we can improve the instrument. So we are still strongly supporting this approach, but we would like to have it be improved and to actually become the performance-based instrument in the very essence of the idea.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So in some ways we provide the reality check, and of course we are, as auditors, drivers of the change, and we try to help the EU run better. Now, last not least, our third and last presentation for this morning. On my right, Alejandro Blanco Fernandez, over to you again. Now, Alejandro, you have ample experience from structural funds. You have also been in charge of our very recent audit opinion on the proposed amendments to cohesion policy regulations, and you will very soon publish a review on the future of cohesion policy. So, taking all of this together, what would you say can we learn from the RRF?
Thank you, Damian. After Ivana and George presented our main findings about the Recovery and Resiliency Facility, I am honored to present our review on the MTR proposal amending the cohesion policy. Let me begin by replying to your question and pointing out that the three main reasons to have these two products linked are: first, the cohesion policy and the Recovery and Resiliency Facility are two different financing models covering the same type of projects. Second, the MTR incorporates certain features of the Recovery and Resiliency Facility in the cohesion policy. And finally, as everybody knows, the Commission's future cohesion policy proposal will incorporate elements of the Recovery and Resiliency Facility. I am pleased to announce that we will publish our review on the future of cohesion policy in 3 days, including a summary of opportunities for legislators to consider when designing and negotiating the next proposal. Moving to the MTR proposal, in our opinion, the first thing I would highlight is that our opinion was issued on the 30th of April 2025, less than a month after the Commission's proposal and only 2 weeks after the European Parliament's request. I will continue with a disclaimer. This opinion does not assess policy areas or political priorities. We leave that for the legislators. Finally, I should highlight that in the opinion, we identify issues for the co-legislators to consider when examining Commission's proposal to implement them in an efficient way. After highlighting the main objectives of the opinion, it is time to move to the content of the proposal and our views. The proposal is entirely volunteer. Member States can decide if and what they want to implement. And it introduces 5 new political priorities: defense and security, affordable housing, energy security and transition, water resilience, and a step for all regions, and it also gives a special focus on eastern border regions. As we clearly stated in our opinion, most of the investments of these political priorities were already possible under cohesion policy. And as I said at the beginning of my intervention, we do not judge the political priorities, we only focus on feasibility. As a general remark, we have pointed out that these proposals come without an impact assessment, which might have a negative impact in its implementation. For this reason, we have proposed that an ex-post analysis should be done. We have also pointed out that by introducing new priorities and specific objectives, which will be programmed under dedicated priorities with their own thematic concentration and financing rules, the proposals risk adding further to the fragmentation and complexity of cohesion policy programs. Regarding the new political priorities, I will begin by defense. We have highlighted several elements that are missing if we want to use the cohesion policy for this area, but I will focus on the 2 main obstacles. First, the need of a clear definition of the defense investments and its alignment with the current European initiatives, and second, the most important element, which is to assess the application of the do no significant harm principle and the transparency obligations for defense investments. Everyone in this conference might see the difficulty of justifying the do no significant harm in the defense-related investments, as well as the difficulty in ensuring transparency given the confidential nature of defense contracts. In the area of affordable housing, first we have highlighted that the proposal does not include any reference to any gap analysis identifying where the EU intervention is more needed. Furthermore, it is not clear how this spending will contribute to the better functioning of national housing markets. We have also highlighted the fact that there is no European definition of the concept of affordable housing, definition that we find very difficult to establish because it will be very different between member states and within cities and regions of the same member state. The package also counters possible disruptions in reprogramming through several flexibilities and incentives. It includes flexibilities on thematic concentration, on the calculation of climate targeting, on large enterprises, on projects selected under direct management instruments, on Just Transition Fund, on reforms, on transfers to certain programs. Newly introduced specific objectives will receive 30% pre-financing and up to 100% co-financing. And on top of this, if a program sees more than 15% of resources, it will benefit from a one-off pre-financing for the entire program and a prolonged deadline for expenditure eligibility. Finally, the proposal allows support for reforms, declaring eligible all the expenses related to reforms. Support may also cover costs that are not directly linked to the implementation of investments. Our opinion on these areas has been the following. Regarding the general flexibilities, we have highlighted that having 2 different closure dates might be too difficult for the managing authorities, and we have recommended a single closure date for all programs and eligibility. We have also recommended that the procedures should be simplified to limit the administrative burden and avoid increasing programming and implementation complexity. Coming back to the complexities that I described in the area of defense and affordable housing, we have recommended to issue clear guidelines that support the national authorities to select and control investments in these areas. We have highlighted that giving a 100% co-financing rate to all regions in all member states might reduce the political ambition of this type of priorities, and at the same time being against the less developed regions, because they get a lower top-up. For this reason, we recommend to consider categories of regions when proposing co-financing rates. Regarding support to reforms, in our opinion, we highlight that the proposal lacks a clear definition for reforms that can be supported under the ERDF or Cohesion Fund, nor does it specify the types of actions or expenditure that will be considered eligible. Without these details, the scope of support that will qualify as reforms remains unclear, potentially encompassing everything from preparatory actions to development of legislative reform packages or broader implementation actions. Furthermore, the current proposal does not clarify the financing model to be used for reforms, such as reimbursement of cost or the financing not linked to cost model. This is particularly relevant as the costs related to the implementation of reforms are generally difficult to identify, quantify, and justify. My final message would be to urge the legislators to consider our opinion when negotiating this proposal and when presenting the proposal for future cohesion policy to ensure it is simple, targeted, and helps member states and regions realize their potential and reduce disparities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, to you as well. Now, I would also have a question for you.
Yeah.
Now, from your presentation, which was also very elaborate indeed, now we see that many elements still need to be clarified in order to implement the new priorities introduced during this midterm revision process. Now, maybe two questions. Do you think these priorities will remain in the future, particularly in cohesion policy after 2027? And perhaps a bit broader, in your opinion, what's the main challenge in shaping the future of cohesion policy?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is that, yes, of course, the political priorities in Europe have changed during the recent years, so it makes no sense that we try to finance regions through cohesion policy, and at the same time, we are not giving them the flexibility to tackle their urgent priorities. So I understand that defense, affordable housing, energy, and all these priorities that we have in this proposal are very high within the political priorities. So I expect that it will continue in the future. Nevertheless, we have seen that there are many complexities within the cohesion policy that jeopardizes the use of cohesion policy to tackle these priorities. So the biggest challenge that I see in the future of cohesion policy, and I hope that the Commission or the legislators will tackle them when proposing and approving the proposal, is how to give enough flexibility for the regions to use the policy the way they need to use it. So for the regions that are eastern border regions, that they have to invest more in military mobility. At the same time, some other regions need to invest in tourists to realize their economic potential, and at the same time, some others in social aspects. So my biggest challenge would be how the Commission and the legislators will do this without introducing huge number of complexities and unnecessary bureaucracy in the cohesion policy.
Oh, very well. Now, I think we've heard quite a lot from our three key speakers here today. I think it's also time to hear from you, dear audience. So we will turn the tables, as we said before already, and we will start using the Slido tool, which you've all tested already earlier on. We will have 4 questions that we would like to ask you, just to also judge your impressions, your mood, and your expertise, because we are here having the pleasure of having you that are all experts in these policies. So, first question would be, which of the following solution would you prefer to ensure the finalization of your RRF measures? And there are multiple selections possible. You have A, B, C, and D. So A, extension of the RRF implementation deadline beyond August 2026. Reallocation of the RRF budget to other areas such as InvestEU and PBIs, EDIP, EU programs for satellite communications. C, streamlining and amending RRPs to meet the deadline. I'm using a lot of acronyms, but you're of course familiar with them as we are. And D, anything else? In that case, please just specify it in the chat. We'll give a few more seconds just to see what are the results, and then we'll also try to comment on it from our side here. Let me just say that we are very thrilled that we have over 450 participants online today. So this is also a guarantee for a very good discussion after this Slido tool. Okay, so there are very few aiming for other, as 1%. If I can see correctly, streamlining and amending RRPs to meet the deadline is the preferred solution by about 20%. Reallocation of the RRF budget is the preferred solution by another third. And again, we have half, so the majority extension, which supports the extension of the RRF implementation beyond deadline, that is August 2026. Now, of course, we are not policymakers here. We are auditors. We provide sound advice to policymakers. We're not here to make political decisions, which, for example, an extension would be. But I will just try to see what is your reaction to the results here from the audience, perhaps starting with Ivana.
Yeah, thank you very much, Damian. So actually, in our audit on absorption, we already said that in that report that it is not easy to expect that all, especially infrastructural projects, which are big in many cases and difficult to implement with many obstacles during implementation, that they will all be implemented on time. And therefore we said, okay, most probably something will have to be done. And one option was always also extension. For us as auditors, always the most important was to finalize the projects and to really achieve the targets which are set. Option not to achieve the targets and leave the projects without without finalization is the worst one. And this C answer, like streamlining and amending RRPs, can be potentially something what can be used, but our fear is that in this case maybe many measures would not be finalized. So I agree with the audience that most probably for them the easiest would be this extension of the RRF implementation deadline. But if legislators decide to go into that direction, so the European Commission together with the European Parliament and all member states together, then it is very important to really ensure that projects are finalized, that projects are done, and then that in the case of non-finalization, we have this reimbursement of the costs which were already paid. So I would also agree with the audience in this one.
Okay, Jörg, do you also agree?
Yeah, maybe just a comment on the first two options. Speaking about these second options, the transfer of the RRF budget to other areas. We need to understand that this is not a classical budget when there is a sum of money and you transfer it. It's actually the right to incur debt, to take the loans, to issue the bonds. So if there is no need, if there is actually no absorption potential, then this debt will simply not occur, which it's actually some kind of a positive for the future generations. As we already mentioned, these are the ones who are going to repay for the debt.
Okay, and Alejandro, what would be your take on the audience's feeling?
Okay. So I understand why the option is choosing the first. The audience, sorry, is choosing the first option. But I would say, like as an auditor, for me, the most important is that the things that need to be done before the closure. First of all responsible authorities need to have legal certainty of the things that they are doing. And I think that unfortunately in the RRF we have seen many times that the legal certainty was missing. And then there has to be a solution that ensures the finalization of the projects on time. It is true that when you have to finance big infrastructure projects, as Ivana said, you have normally a mature deadline that will increase the need of years. So for that reason, I understand that the first option, it is the preferred option. I don't see viable solutions on the other three, so I would keep the extension, or to at least propose solutions that give legal certainty to the responsible authorities and that they are not too creative for the auditors to be complicated in the future to understand.
Okay, well, very well. We've heard now what the audience thinks. We've heard from this side of the table also what we think of that. Let's continue. Let's go with our second slider question, and this one will ask you to use your keyboard a little bit more. It's not a multiple choice question, so please, if you can give us some suggestions. We are asking you, what is one characteristic of the RRF which is worth maintaining in a future instrument? in a future instrument. So please, if you can provide an answer, we'll try to have a cloud in front of us, and let's see which one comes out boldest. We'll just give a few seconds.
So the color means that is
Right, I think we're getting an idea. Very good. Let's give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's go. So I think, I don't know if it's 50%, but there seems to be quite a lot of consensus around reforms, flexibility, high pre-financing, performance-based also, and simplification. So these would probably be the 5 characteristics that our audience thinks would be worth keeping. So reforms and perhaps then performance-based, I think, come out strongest. What do you think? Let's start with this side of the table now, Alejandro.
Well, I think that yes, for the future instrument that would be applied to cohesion policy, reforms is part of the elements that are on the table. But we can never forget that reforms are already key for cohesion policy, because we have to fulfill the enabling conditions that are basically the reforms. So this is a different way to tackle reforms. So from now on, instead of only requiring them to be able to spend the money, it will be also a part of the financing of the total plan. I would also point out that higher pre-financing is also one of the things that need to be kept, and this would also help to encompass the European budget with payments, with the absorption for the member states. So I would say that higher pre-financing is also, in my humble opinion, a good feature to be kept. And for sure, when we talk about flexibility and simplification, and these are the words or part of the words that would be key in our future of cohesion policy, we have a problem, and is that when everybody understands flexibility and simplification in their own way, then coming to a definition of how we should tackle the policy to be flexible or to be simple might not be so easy, but I am sure that we will do it in the future. So this is my take.
Okay, I think this was quite clear. Jörg?
Yeah, maybe just to add a couple of words. I agree that reforms could be a key word, because we all remember that through the cycles of the European semesters, in country-specific recommendations, it was many times that countries were recommended to do certain reforms. There was actually not any carrot, either a stick to push them through. So with this instrument, we got first time in history a large carrot that bring the push for the reforms through. On the other hand, we are pointing out in our review that related to the reforms, if use the same instruments in the future, we definitely need to tackle the question of the reversals. Doing the reforms through legislative process, collecting the money from the European funds, and then later on by, for example, the change of government or in the parliament, then reversing. There's actually no instrument who can prevent that. There's no penalty for any such doing. And speaking of the other keyword, as I already mentioned before, performance-based instrument. There was also somebody mentioning results-oriented budgeting. This is a long trend. I've been in this budget business for more than 20 years. I have followed these developments. And now for the first time, we really have a good intention and the possibility to push for the performance-based. And as already said, taking into account all the recommendations that we have presented in our reports and especially in this review, I'm sure if they took them on board, we will definitely have a very strong and good instrument that will be really performance-based oriented.
Okay, well, very good. I think that was also very clear. Ivana, do you think, what do you think about this?
I think that actually when we look at the boxes, something else also would probably appear as a very big, because we have them all over, like milestones, targets and milestones, intermediate targets, financing not linked to the cost, FNLC. So we have them all over. It seems that audience likes a lot this model of financing, that basically funds are given a little bit earlier than projects are really implemented, which is incentive in a way and helping member states to implement better and not to face difficulties with liquidity. So this is something what one should really take into account, but only the very important element is how the milestones and targets are set and defined. So this is something what we have to take to have in mind, that there is no lot of room of judgmental approach and subjective assessment of the dissatisfactory fulfillment of milestones and targets. So I think that this is also a good element. There is also one box, nothing. So one part of our audience is very critical towards the RRF, so it's also, and pre-financing, higher pre-financing, which also goes into this direction, that it is good to find a model how to motivate a little bit in a different way member states and support member states in a different way than what we have now in cohesion policy, which is pretty cumbersome for the member states and implementation in the member states. And reforms, my colleagues already commented, so I will not refer a lot on that.
Okay, well, very good. So before we move on from this slide, let's just look at this cloud again. So reform, performance-based, high pre-financing, simplification and flexibility definitely emerge in the middle. So there's broader consensus on those among our audience. So let's move now to the next one. Now we've heard what's worth keeping. Now let's have a look at the other side. What one characteristic of the RRF that you would not repeat in a future instrument? So let's look at the other side. One characteristic of the instrument that is not worth repeating in any or a future instrument. Let's give ourselves a few seconds on this one as well. And while you're putting in your commentary, let me also again stress that we will, after the Slido, be happy to have a very open debate with you based on any questions you may have. So you can already start putting them in the Slido, not in the poll, but in the questions section. It's just next to it. I will get to it right in a moment. I think we're already starting getting an idea. Right, there's quite a lot of it. We'll definitely retain this cloud. It's also very useful input into our processes and also feedback on our work.
Definitely, because each word is very interesting and important.
Exactly. Every word matters, every thought, every comment matters. And there was a question from one of you if we will be able to share the slides, the presentation with you afterwards, and we're working on getting them to you afterwards indeed. So, okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. So I think the broadest consensus is on short timeline. So we ask what is a characteristic that is not worth repeating in the future. Short timeline. National plans, lack of proper controls. Then we have a few more, such as debt, no partnership principle, borrowing, also related to debt, and too many reforms. So this goes quite against the previous one that emerged, that we should essentially be looking at the reforms also in the future. So I will start differently now. I'll start with you, Ivana. What do you think? I mean, short timeline is the winner here, followed by lack of proper controls and national plans.
Yeah, but I would start with these too many reforms, because actually it is not so contradicting the previous one, because okay, we can have reforms, but it's really, if it's too many, then it's very difficult to implement, especially in a short timeline. And we know that reforms must be also well thought through and prepared, and then in some cases member states are really stuck with something what was decided at the beginning, and then in the meantime, if they did some analysis and wanted to change something, it is really not easy to change in the RRF. So this is definitely something what worth not to be repeated. And then short timeline, but RRF was supposed to be recovery and resilience instrument, like quick help and support to the member states to overcome the crisis. But it turns through the investment projects which are included into instrument pretty similar to cohesion. And of course, in cohesion, we cannot finalize everything within 9 years. How to expect that now the same projects will be implemented in 6 and less years? So of course that timeline is short because the whole programming was done in such a quick way that again, projects which were included were not fit to the timeline envisaged in this instrument. So it is very important to think about how to match proper projects with the timeline and objectives of the instruments when we introduce some instrument. And I also see many points related to legal uncertainty, complexity, no transparency. So this is all really like a red line, especially no transparency. With public money, we have to be transparent, and this is something what cannot be repeated. So I would agree with you that we should keep this slide and take into account each and every box which is here.
That's a very good idea, and let me just say that almost 130 from the audience commented on this one. York, what's your take on that?
I would definitely go for the borrowing or death, but before I go there, I would like to comment at least 2 more. Short timeline, yeah, definitely a problem. On one of the slides that Ivana has showed us in her initial presentation, you have seen that 50% of all the investments will be finalized in the last year, which is not the whole year, it's just the half of the year, or slightly more than a half. So next year until August, 50% of the investments are planned to be finished. I'm not so optimistic if this will actually be a success, but let us see. The next one that I would like to comment is, of course, the lack of proper controls, especially because we published a report on the member states' control systems. And one of the key findings was, as I already mentioned, that there were actually no proper controls at the beginning of the RRF. And more than that, more important is that those control systems were not coherent. We definitely need coherency in the control system so that we can compare the systems between the countries and optimize them practically everywhere at the same time. I would like to also take the opportunity to make a little bit of advertising for a program that also the Commission advertises. It's the Arachna. Many states are not so keen of using it, but it's very important to use it, because, as I mentioned before, reporting on the cases that EPO is working on, some misuse of the funds can happen not in just one country. And having a data about the companies using the funds in different countries, for example, is very important just to see how these funds are paid out in different countries, because only this cross-section can then bring some additional information in a potential misuse. But let me now go back to borrowing, or the other one says death. As I already mentioned, this is for the first time in history that Europe has taken such a large amount of borrowing. You know that this is practically doubling the financial power of European Union. We are speaking of approximately 800 billions in the period of this 7 years. We have seen that the European Commission has managed to secure this money, but as I said, we will repay this debt for 30 years. Before introducing these instruments, our budgets have functioned on the principle of the balanced budget. So the European Union budget was organized on the principle that we can spend only so much as we can collect. So I'm not a big fan of borrowing. I hope this was really a once in a lifetime gesture, and that we are now going back to normal, I would say. So I would say that this borrowing is definitely something that we should not repeat into in the future instruments.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, a lot of words and thoughts about debt and borrowing, something we've commented on before. Jörg, you had a report on this a couple of years ago, and I didn't mention before, you talk a lot about control about today, because you also had a report about controls on public procurement and state aid, which we've said are still not up to scratch, and this was also a very important piece of the puzzle. Alejandro, what's your take on all that?
Well, first thing I would like to say is that I would, myself, when I analyzed the RRF or cohesion policy, I detached the borrowing and the debt of the implementation conditions. So I can share everything that Jörg just said about borrowing or debt, but I don't think that this is relevant for the future of cohesion policy. That would be a decision for the policymakers to take or not how the future MFF will be financed. When I talk about, or if I read all these words, I would say like, the problem here is that the legislators try to be very innovative. Very innovative because they forgot that they already had a tool that was helping the regions to tackle their economic, or to improve their economic potential and to have more conversion towards the European average. But they decided to invent something totally different. So here we have also some analysis that says no partnership principle. But at the end, the regions are the ones responsible to do most of the investments. So how can you take a decision without involving regions and then asking them to do something else? And then lack of controls. That is something that is unacceptable, because at the end, no matter how much money a member state is receiving or not, it is still public money. It is still taxpayers' money. So nobody can believe that this money will be paid without any controls. There are controls, of course there are controls. There are complexities, the same as in cohesion policy. So I had the opportunity to live during the negotiations, and whenever we were trying or we were raising any concern, the Commission was saying, this is not cohesion policy. But sorry, now we are in a much worse instrument than the cohesion policy, because it's more complicated, you have less time, you have not consulted the regions, you have not taken into account any partnership principle. Now there are reforms that you have paid, but at the same time the investments need to be done. So yes, I would change clearly the entire model. So I would take all the words, as Ivana said, and do something totally different.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Perhaps we can dive more deeply into that later in our debate. Before that, let's ask the audience one last question via the Slido. Again, it will be slightly easier on you. It's multiple choice, but please also, if you have any ideas, specify them. So we're going to ask a question about the other side of the coin of today's discussion, cohesion policy. So in your view, what would be the most what would be most suitable for cohesion funding in the future? And we have three options. A, financing not linked to costs, so the RRF model in a way. B, performance-based funding. You've heard what we think about performance-based, what it is. C, continuation of current cohesion funding, which means cost reimbursement. And D, anything else. So let's give each other a few seconds to complete this last Slido question. I think we're already starting to get a rough idea where the mood of the room is.
Give a bit more time because these two are competing. I'm really
Exactly.
curious.
Exactly, we'll allow for a little more time.
But we are now already
We just said this
one
was not performance based, so
No, it's good because the third one didn't get a lot. So RRF model is not an option for many.
Okay, so we have almost 140 from the audience commenting on this question. And I think, okay, let's give ourselves 5 seconds. I'll start the countdown as before. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's go with it. 150 almost commentators on this one. Let's start with the bottom. So 4% have think that there should be something else than what we have asked in these three questions. 12% think that financing not linked to costs, so the RRF model would be most suitable for cohesion funding in the future. Continuation of current cohesion funding, so cost reimbursement, is favored by almost 40%. And performance-based funding is favored by almost half, 45% to be precise. I think we can close it there. The answers are probably still coming in, but I think we're getting the good picture. There are two sort of neck-and-neck competitors, continuation of current cohesion funding, so cost reimbursement, and on the other hand, performance-based funding. So I think that's very interesting. Alejandro, I think I will give you the floor first. You spoke a lot about that. What do you think? We have two very close competitors that are not really going in the same direction.
yes, I would say that they are not going in the same direction, but they could be going in the same direction. So first, continuation of current cohesion funding, cost reimbursement, for us, that's the key. At the end, we cannot have any system in the future that pays more than the real value of the hospital or of the investments. So that, for me, it would be a key. No matter what, or regardless the type of funding that you have at the end, there has to be a follow-up of the cost and of the investments. You have to understand that we cannot be deviating the actual cost of the estimated cost. So, and then when we talk about performance-based funding, as I said before, when I refer to simplification and flexibility, the problem is that what do we understand by performance-based funding? If it's to have intermediary milestones or targets that will release some funds for the national and local, national, regional, and local authorities to get more liquidity and to be able to encompass the implementation of the investments with the payments from the union, then yes. But if we have to wait until we see the real performance of an investment in order to reimburse it, unfortunately, this, in my humble opinion, would take a long time for the money to be paid. So I think we have to find a sort of middle way between cohesion funding currently and the future performance-based funding. And I would take the opportunity here to say for the legislators that we saw how being creative in the RRF is creating problems, especially for us as auditors. So let's try to be less creative and let's try to fix the problems of the cohesion policy, if there are any, and not try to invent the wheel again, because we saw that this, unfortunately, will not happen.
So let's fix the problem, not reinvent the wheel, if I got it well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take this forward probably later on in our debate as well. Jörg.
Yeah, I'm glad that the majority, at least the answer that got the most support, it's performance-based funding. Because as I already said, I've been in this business since years. We are speaking about this performance-based, result-oriented budgeting, result-based budgeting, and so on. For me, it's very important to go in these directions because it goes toward economy, effectiveness, efficiency. It looks toward the results and the impacts, which are very important. Because currently, as we saw, it's more about the outputs, and in some cases of the audit in the field of RRF, we even found out that it was even just about the inputs. So for me, it's definitely going toward the results and the impacts. So yes, definitely on the same side as the majority.
All right, well, we have an agreement here. Ivana?
So yes, I think that message from the audience regarding this performance-based funding is clear in a way that everybody would like to see more on achieving the results. So what we really did with the money, in a way, did we transform our technologies, economy, how we enhanced different industries, what are we doing in relation to education, social support, so different fields of policies, but in terms of concrete results, what was achieved. I think that this is important for each and every citizen. They would like to see what was really achieved, not only like which type of projects we financed, or when we talk about cost reimbursement, which I really don't like, is related to this eligibility of expenditures, and I don't know, did we finance metal or wooden windows and this type of things. So this is completely irrelevant in a way. So we have to move from this very, very traditional financing, which is very cumbersome for the end users, for the administration, to something what will give us a little bit more idea on what we really want to achieve, and how and where we want to move, and how to increase competitiveness of the Europe as a whole, productivity, how to have more innovation, more research, how to have more opportunities for youth. So this is something what we have to think about, and not only focusing on procedures and cost reimbursement. But of course, that when we talk about public money, we will always have to be able to trace the money flow, and then to respect all legality and regularity rules which are there. Only with the performance, we will give a little bit more information on what we are doing, how and what we want to achieve. And I think that this is a key solution for the future.
Very good. So I think we've got a very clear view also from this side of the table. We're now through with these Slido questions. These are the key questions that we as auditors are also asking regularly, but there are, of course, many more. Some of them you can already see also in the Q&A section of this Slido tool, where we are moving to now. So this is the second side of the tool, the other side. And if you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to put them in writing now. Please be brief so we can read them out. And this also allows all the other people in the audience to vote on them, which is very useful. In case we may not be able to take all of the questions, we will at least focus on those. So this is now the time for your questions. If you'd like to ask a question directly to our speakers, please raise your hand digitally in the Teams platform, and we'll give you the floor so you can turn on your camera and microphone. Now, we know usually there are not so many of direct questions, but we receive a lot of questions in writing. So until 12 o'clock, please feel encouraged to raise your hand, ask us a question directly. In the meantime, I'll read out those questions already received. I'll try to put them to each of our speaker that has talked about it, and we'll try to just take most of them. I think the first question, I think Jörg, you spoke about this before. It's about the reversal. So what happens if a member state reverses reforms after receiving RRF payments? How long? And how will the reforms be monitored?
Yes, thank you, Damian. I think this is a very good question. Key questions that everybody actually poses to, even myself. Unfortunately, the current system does not give an answer that we would like to have, like that we will follow the reforms for years. The instruments that are currently in use will be, there will be a possibility to make some corrections only by the end of the next year. Only by the end of the 2026, then the flag falls, and practically there is no instruments or no power that you can react to any reversals. And of course, there is a risk that reversals can happen a year later, or 2 years later, or 4 years later. Definitely a problem that needs to be tackled if the RRF model is to be used into the future instruments. We need a longer period of monitoring, and we need some instruments to prevent any kind of reversals.
Okay, Ivana, Alejandro, if you'd like to add to this, please be my guest.
I would like to add that regarding reforms, it is very difficult to log them because it is like ongoing change and ongoing process. As circumstances are changing, we can also change our ideas and approach to different reforms. So here, I don't know, it is okay, something was done because in 2021, 2020, when we defined the reforms, this was needed to be done. But then, if circumstances are changing in the meantime, and now in 27, 28, we will maybe have to change some reforms which were done in a different direction. I would not even call it reversal. It's just like the change is constant and ongoing, and we have to live with that.
Okay, York?
Yeah, maybe just to be clear, depends on what reforms we are talking about.
Exactly.
If we are talking about judicial reforms, I cannot see going back to something that the circumstances could change so substantially. And speaking on the ongoing reforms, yeah, for example, a pension reform, extending the period that we need to work, I don't know, from 65 to 67. Speaking about demographic situation in Europe, you can only expect even a further prolongation, but definitely not a reversal. Even if somebody runs for the parliament on the agenda to go back to 60, 65, that would then be a problem. That could be a reversal. And this is something that we are talking as a problem when we are using this term reversal.
Yeah. Only when we think about educational reforms, business environment, labor market, public administration reforms. So this is very, very flexible.
Okay, very good, lively debate so far. Alejandro, would you like to add to that?
Well, for reforms, I must say that I have my mind a little bit divided, because I understand that certain reforms are needed in the member states, but I also understand that the democracy in a country will make that the government of the country can choose or not to have a type of pension reform or a type of labor reform, and then they also can decide, or the population can be unhappy and vote to revert it. So for me, the reforms are the most complicated thing. So that's why maybe the wisest thing is that we link the payments for reforms only for the parts that are needed for the investments, and we stop playing around. But that's my personal opinion.
Okay, well, of course, thank you very much. These are also questions that policymakers will have to take and make down the line. And as we said, we are expecting first proposal for the next EU long-term budget in about a month's time. Another question received, it seems to be quite popular, received a lot of your votes, a lot of your support. We've addressed it before, implementation period for the RRF. I have to bring it up. It seems that the audience still has some questions about it. Do you expect the RRF's implementation period to be extended? I know as auditors we can't talk about expectations, it's not up to us as policymakers, but based on our experience what is, let's say, what could we say about this at all?
Yeah.
If we could be brief about this one.
Yeah, and I know where does this come from, because basically probably most of you already saw that European Parliament prepared a report on RRF implementation, and one paragraph in this report is also related to the extension of the implementation period, where European Parliament calls on the Commission to extend for 18 months period of implementation for big infrastructural projects. So this is something what is on horizon. On the other hand, many of you, when I was in the member states talking with some of you, said that there are obstacles to this related to the own resource decision and the fact that the borrowing must be finalized in 2026 and cannot be extended. So in this case, all money would be borrowed and then used only later on, and this can also create difficulties. So we see that there are some options on the table for the extension, some obstacles for the extension. So, but there is a clear wish and will from the European Parliament that this is done in order to have projects finalized and not just deleted from the national recovery and resilience plans or transferred to the cohesion.
Okay, very well. Let's see if Jörg, Alejandro, any views on this before we move on? Okay.
In my case, I would say that for the extension, for sure, it would be a good idea and it would create 18 more months. But for me, the key, as I said before, is that there is legal certainty for the national authorities to know how they have to close up the RRF. Because I think currently the situation is not like that. And I would also want to warn against the idea of moving projects from the RRF to the cohesion policy, because as we said, RRF was not linked to cost, was financing not linked to cost. Putting them now in cohesion policy would require a huge division of the cost of the project, a huge analysis of the cost of each project to see which cost has been covered by the milestones and targets that have been already paid for these projects. So for me, that's the no viable solution, because it would create a huge bureaucracy and a huge probability of high level of errors in this type of projects. So for me, yes, extending could be an option, and other option could be creating functional projects that at the end the national authorities would finalize the projects with their own money, and they will be given a deadline to finalize these projects. But for sure, the underlying transactions need to be finalized, the cost needs to be analyzed, and we need to have the assurance that all the money that the member states have been received has been invested and put in the real economy for each country.
Okay, very well. I'll stay with you, Alejandro, for a while. We've got a lot of questions also on cohesion, which is, of course, very natural. I'll try to merge a few of them together. You've talked now already about how to, let's say, transition from the RRF to cohesion. Is it realistic to expect that a new cohesion policy can be built on the RRF model? So is it realistic to expect? Again, I need to say, for the benefit of everyone, we don't have a crystal ball here. We're not policymakers. We cannot make predictions. We're not policymakers exactly.
Okay, yes, thank you for giving me the beginning of what I was going to say. Yes, we are not policymakers. But what we have clear is that at this current stage, we are seeing many, many difficulties in the RRF implementation. So it makes no sense that we try to translate a model that is having a lot of difficulties to create a new model in a policy that has been working for more than 30 years already. So I would say that cohesion policy can be improved, cohesion policy can be simplified, can be more simple, but this doesn't mean that you have to delete all the elements of cohesion policy and transform it in the RRF. The only good or the only positive element of the RRF that we have seen is that the money from the European budget is paid faster. But this doesn't mean that the implementation on the ground is faster, doesn't mean that we have legal certainty or traceability of the expenses of the underlying transactions. So please be cautious when you try to incorporate elements of the RRF into cohesion policy, I would say.
Okay, Very good. And perhaps just last question again on the cohesion. It's linked to what you were talking about now. The question goes, it's very direct. Can you specify what would be a good performance-based model for the future cohesion policy? In your view, I know that we cannot say something on this. We're not policy makers. We're not making definitive suggestions. But we had experience with cohesion policy auditing.
Yes, and that's why I would like to say cohesion policy is working. Yes, we could do a performance instrument, or we will try to elaborate a little bit more in cohesion policy, but it is working. The model that we have works, gives traceability, gives the assurance. It is true that the rules and the bureaucracy have been very, very heavy, especially during the past years. So for this reason, I would say that the generosity of the legislators would improve the policy by creating some intermediary steps that would release money faster from the European budget and would give liquidity to the regions. But I don't think that we really need to change cohesion policy so dramatically that we have to go to an entirely different model of reimbursement.
Okay, well, thank you. Now let's go back a little bit, take a step back, and let's look at the results. There are lots of questions about actual results. The question goes, do you have any indication from your audit work which funding model is more successful in terms of actual results? So I'm looking perhaps you, Ivana, and then York. And then York, we also have a question for you about control more specifically.
Now, regarding results and which model is more successful, with the RRF we said that it's very difficult to assess effectiveness because we have all these difficulties with milestones and targets which do not really trace the results, and then they are not linked to the policy areas and 6 pillars, and then we cannot see what was really achieved from all national recovery and resilience plans at the level of the RRF as a whole. So there are missing elements. It is just like financing, not linked to the cost, but without these performance elements that we can really trace and assess achievement of the results, and not to talk about efficiency and value for money. In cohesion, this is why I say a lot during discussions that there is more performance in cohesion than in the RRF, because in cohesion we have different common indicators and objectives which are set, and also baseline figures, and then figures which we expect to be achieved. So in cohesion we can trace even better what was achieved and how. Only maybe now linking my answer to what Alejandro said. So basically cohesion is functioning. It's a good policy, but we all feel that it should be modernized and simplified, especially for final recipients which are outside of the public sector, like entrepreneur, small and medium enterprises, non-profit organizations, youth organizations, so different stakeholders, households outside the public sector, where we can actually try to implement more simplified cost options or financing not linked to the cost for them, in a way that we finance concrete achievements, concrete results at the level of industry, SMEs, NGOs, and not to ask them to report, to have this very difficult reporting procedure, collection of the invoices, eligibility, tracing eligibility, then conflict of interest at that level, which is outside of the public sector. I think that here we can find room for improvement and simplification, and to make a little bit more attractive all this funding coming from the cohesion for them and successful implementation of their projects.
All right, so this is our take on the results side, and now I'd like to come back to what we've also discussed quite at length before, to the control side of it. And I think this will be a question, York, for you. So the question goes as follows. I'll try to merge actually 2 questions, I think.
You can merge the last 2 on the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In performance-based instruments, what exactly do we need to control? What do we audit? only achievement of results or also legality and regularity of transactions? And then also, what is your vision on harmonizing? I think this is the one that I've had here, the control
IT
systems.
Yeah. The control systems and the IT systems, yeah. Speaking about what needs to be audited in the performance-based instruments, whether it is just the results or is it also the legality and regularity, of course we need to monitor both. Following the legality and regularity, it's a condition. It's not an option. It's a must. And then, of course, auditing the achievement of the results is the next level. This is the level that we are discussing today. How to put our budgets on steroids, how to perform better, how to bring more to our stakeholders, to the taxpayers, for the money that we are spending. And speaking about the IT systems, yes, definitely. Putting all the players on the same platform, it's crucial. Not just for the good performance, but also for the efficiency of controls, for example. And it's not just about the stakeholders on the Commission sides or on the member state sides. It's also about our work. Having everything on the same platform makes our work also easier. And it's actually not just the European Court of Auditors. It's also the other institutions of the immune system of the European Union, like Olaf and EPO. I think we can all benefit from having a robust and coherent and a single platform IT system.
Okay, now we talked about IT. There's another question in there which kind of relates to that. It goes in the direction whether the control systems between member states should also be sort of brought together. Is a unified obligatory control system as a basis for all member states' control systems even feasible?
As I mentioned in one of my previous speeches, I mentioned this Arachna. Having the whole information, also from the member states, it's crucial. Because some stakeholders, especially from the point of work where European public prosecutors are working on those cases, where organized crime is somewhere behind the misuse of European funds, it's crucial to have the broader information around the whole European Union, because without this information, they really struggle to gather information. They have a good cooperation among the services in the member states, but still, having a unique platform would definitely make their work much easier.
I think maybe, Ivana, you've also been in audits in many different member states. What's your take on this?
I think that the most important is that systems are functioning. I would not go into direction that now in each and every member states we need completely same bodies and same structure of the controls, but the efficiency and effectiveness of the control system is the most important. So if you can ensure that by having one centralized control body, then I am fine with that, or one audit authority. If you need multiple of them at different levels, I'm also fine with that. The most important is that controls are functioning, and I think that one element which was missing in the RRF from the very beginning was exactly this, like to say very clearly and directly to all member states that even though, no matter what type of financing we have, so in the RRF, financing not linked to the cost, you always have to ensure legality and regularity of the transactions. So you always have to respect EU and national regulation, like Jörg said. So these are like the basic elements. So going towards performance-based or any other model of financing does not mean that we can now use public funds without transparency and without legality and regularity.
Okay, Alejandro, any take on that?
Yes, I would say that I fully agree with Ivana, because for me the first thing that we have to understand is that we are not equal. And there we could define a policy that might be fair for everyone. So for example, if I try to impose the same control system in a country that is regionalized and very big than I put in a country that is nationalized in a tiny country, I would be creating excessive bureaucracy for one of the two. Either because I'm putting a lot of requirements that are not needed in the small country, or because in the big country I'm putting things that only from a national country I could fulfill. So for me, the important thing and that we have to take into account for the future is that we need to adapt the policy to the circumstances of each country. Then about what Jörg said, if Arachne is needed or not at the European level, I would say that there's for sure a need for more transfer of information and more connection about between the different member states and the control systems of the member states. We are going to do an audit on Arachne, so afterwards we will be able to conclude if it's the best tool to do it or not. But at the moment I would say yes, we need to exchange information, and yes, we need to adapt the control systems, and no matter what we do, no matter the type of financing model that we take, we have to ensure that legality and regularity are fulfilled in all and each member state, region, and municipality.
Okay, well, very good. I think I can pick up on what you've just said through another question. It's rather a comment, and we've received also lots of comments. And if we don't get time to get back to you on those, I think we'll try to just keep the slide open if possible, and just provide our feedback and responses very briefly to those. So keep it open also on your side afterwards. There's a comment. Now it's impossible to obtain data on beneficiaries from other member states as required by the Commission, and the whole obligation is imposed on member states. I think it's just something that Alejandro just brought up, and I know that Ivana, you've also looked into this transparency in previous reports, Jörg also in terms of controls. What would be our take on this comment? We know that there's also this list of 100 required largest recipients.
Yes, yes. So we have this, we commented actually that first the understanding on who final recipients are is very different among the member states, and that in many cases we have on these lists like public entities, ministries, local and regional government units, public enterprises, and this was not the idea, because the idea is to really see who are end users of the funds, because who is interested to know how much funds one ministry received? It's not so relevant in this transparency part. So, and then also this limitation to 100 biggest. Why? Because this is public money. We should know exactly the whole list of end users of the public funding. It's not about 100 or 1,000. It's about all end users. And transparency is extremely important because it is part of fight against corruption, fraud. It is part of involvement and engagement of public into what is done with the public money. So it increases public trust. So it is really important to be transparent in each and every aspect. And what we said that for us, it's really red line, the fact that with public money we don't know who are end users. And this cannot be repeated in any other future instruments.
Okay, any take on this, Alejandro, Jörg? Okay.
I will just say that I fully share what Ivana just said, but it is true that the system was created in such a complicated way that at the end there are plenty of misunderstanding or different understanding of the same rules, and that traceability, as we would like to have it, is much easier in the cohesion policy that is currently being implemented than in this sort of hybrid that is the RRF model.
Okay, very good. So I think we've addressed this comment now. I think I would like to get back to another one on cohesion. And I'm just looking through it. I think it was you received quite a lot of your votes.
Do we have
Exactly.
some hands raised?
Excuse
Do
me?
we have some hands raised?
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. And we still have 400 participants, which is very encouraging. So I would like to again put it out to you. You're very warmly invited to raise your hands, and we'll give you the floor.
So we have 400.
Yes, it would be nice to see you and hear you. So please raise hands.
I think that I've seen one hand raised for just a split second, but it was lowered immediately. So please do not stay shy. We're here to really discuss this openly with you. We've published a whole lot of our reports, and we will do many more. But this is really a crunch time to discuss the lessons learned, both from the RRF and for the future of cohesion. So please share anything you would like to share with us also on camera. We have Filippo Cangemi, if I got this right. Filippo, please turn on your camera, microphone, and if you could just say where you come from, which organization you represent.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for possibility to share my experience, and very useful this discussion. I know very well someone of your participant, and I am from Italy. I am authority on RRF, national RRF plan in Italy, and I very interested to discussion, and I have a question. And consideration about the future also. I noticed that the philosophy of RRF is not completely understood on side of control. I think on side of audit. I completely agree that the basis of legality on national and EU rules is completely the basis of our job and our vision. But I think it's some improvement could be made in the part of link this kind of legality to the cost. I think in the philosophy of the RRF that linked on the performance and on the milestone target, I think could be useful to explore other possibility to link the audit not to the cost but to the real target, real objective that the single plan had. I think is not
this discrepancy that you have showed on this slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Filippo. Is this your question or your comment, rather? Do you have any specific question?
Yeah, it is my question and consideration, yes, because
Okay.
understood that the cost is important. Also, the double funding is one of the element, the principal element of discussion and of our work is very focused on this. But in any case, I think the next step is to leave this kind of philosophy and in this kind of plan, in this kind of a program.
Yeah.
Thank you, Filippo.
Thank you very much. So definitely, but I agree with you that we have to be more clear in this. So basically, in these type of programs where we have milestones and targets well set in the performance-based programs, then milestones and targets are really linked to the results. And we should, in our audits, check if the results are really achieved or not. So this is one part. And this is what we are doing also with the RRF checking if milestones and targets, which are assessed by the Commission as a satisfactory fulfilled, are really satisfactorily fulfilled. So this is definitely one part of our audit work. At the same time, in order to achieve some milestones and targets, you have different procedures in place. Public procurement, call for proposals, contracts signed, implementation of the projects. And of course, that for this, we have to check if everything was respected, because public procurement rules must be respected in order to really then be able to say that money is spent in a legal and regular way. State aid rules, then if some eligibility conditions were set, if they are respected or not. So basically here in this type of instruments, we have two levels. One is this controlling legality and regularity in terms of respecting all the rules, and another one is controlling if really the goals which are set, results which are set, were achieved or not.
Jörg?
Maybe I would just like to add a comment on the thing that's related to this, what you have been just talking about. And it's the question of the prepayments. We have seen this instrument has been largely used in the RRF in the first period. I understand that when the RRF was coined, we were in this COVID situation when there was a risk of a negative growth, and the first intention was to pump as much money and as quickly as possible into the system, because that period we all remember that the public debt and the deficits in the member states were high. The monetary policy also reached its limits. The bazooka of Mario Draghi came to the limits of the impact of the monetary policy. So the question back then was, is there any other player who could actually pump the money into the system? Because monetary policy was at its limit. The fiscal policies of the member states were at their limits. So basically the European Union as a supranational organization was the only one possible that has a capability to borrow money and to pump the money into the system. So the prepayments were used especially because of this reason, to pump the money into the system. But through the period, we have seen that there is another risk emerging, and it is that the certain projects that have already prepaid may maybe not reach their milestones and targets, and that they may even come into a situation that they will not be finalized by the end of the RRF period. My appeal would be in the future instruments, especially because we are not in this once-in-a-lifetime situation of the risk of the negative growth due to something like it was the COVID, this health crisis. Maybe these prepayments should really not be used. In one of the slides that my colleague Ivana has showed, we have seen this discrepancy. We had like more than 50% of the funds already being paid, but only like 1/3 of the milestones and targets being reached, which is definitely a huge discrepancy. Just as something that definitely needs to be in the mind of the legislators following the path of introducing certain elements of this in the future instruments.
Alejandro?
Yes. First of all, hi, Filippo. We shared together many negotiations in the Council, so it's great to see you here. I could say that regarding your question, it's complicated, and it's complicated because everything that Jörg just explained. And it's, on one hand, the legislators wanted to have a tool that was going to be putting money in the economy fast, but they didn't do budgetary support. And if I read in the Article 22, there are certain elements like double funding, conflict of interest, corruption and fraud that I can only see if I check the underlying transactions, if I check the cost of the transactions, if I check and verify the public procurement. Otherwise, I cannot see if there's double funding. I cannot see if there's corruption. I could only have the conclusion that there's corruption if a member state lies explicitly to the Union, which the probability is quite low. Of course, if we would like to have a perfect model, we should have done the things differently. We should have done equal treatment and evaluation of all the reforms, a sound analysis of all the milestones and targets to calculate the estimated cost of these milestones and targets, and to ensure that at the end of the programming period, all the underlying transactions were finished. And there should be a system that doesn't allow to have continuous reprogramming in the system, changing the phases of the milestones and targets, because this affects the cost of the different milestones and targets. As this situation is not there now, the only element that we have to control is the cost or the legality and regularity of the transaction, to see that all the money that was received by the member states was totally and fully invested in the national, regional, and local economies of each member state. And this we will be only able to prove and do in the coming years. So yes, I could understand what your comment was about, but the problem is that this is not this system. For that to be possible, the system should have been put in place in a very different way. That is not what we have today on the table.
Okay, very well. I think quite a lot of commentary already. I think we've covered a lot of ground through our commentary, a lot of different aspects indeed covered. Thank you for your question very much. Would we have any other question? This would be time for the last question today, if there are any hands raised. We've received a lot of commentary on the Slido, lots of questions there. Some of them will have to remain unanswered for the moment. Let me see if there are any hands raised. Let's do as they do in the auction houses, going once, going twice. Sold. I don't see any hands raised. Well, this means we've been quite crystal clear so far. Before we start concluding, just one question. We talked a lot about results, differences between the policies. From our audit work, do we have clear information in which policy, let's say, in which funding model is more successful in terms of actual results? If you could be very brief about that.
Yeah, this is actually what I tried to say when I talked about cohesion. But I saw, because I briefly just went through all the questions, and most of the questions are going into direction on what is the solution, how we can even have, can we expect that we can have in reality performance-based model implemented. And the most important is that, of course, in this performance-based model, if we decide to go into that direction, which I hope we will, and you will, because you are decision policy makers together with the Commission and the European Parliament. So basically, what is extremely important is to really set the goals which we want to achieve in different policy areas. But it is not sufficient only to have the goals defined and set, but also baseline figures. So what is our starting point? Because at this moment in RRF, Commission is reporting that they financed 1.5 million SMEs, and therefore it was successful, because when we compare with the cohesion, it was less number. But it doesn't mean anything, because we need to see what was financed, what was achieved in different policy areas, and what was the starting point, what was the starting figure. So, and I think that this is something what we can have at the level of the European Union, we can have at the level of the member states, at the level of the regions, towns, municipalities. You know, it's a vertical and horizontal collection. It's a matrix, but it can be done. It is complex, but it is not impossible to be done. And then if we have this very well set, then of course we decide at the policy level, you will decide on the priorities and policy areas which you will finance more or less, which you will have as a priority, as a high priority or less urgent priorities. And this is how that new instrument should be modeled within the any policy. It can be cohesion policy, it can be competitiveness, it can be agricultural policy, but really to be sure as a Europe where we are heading and what we want to achieve.
Okay, very good. I would just like to see if our other two panelists would like to come in on that before we start wrapping up.
I can only agree with Ivana. Let's go for the effectiveness and efficiency. Let's go for the results. Let's actually go for the very cost and benefits so that our stakeholders really see what they get for the money.
Very good. That was crystal clear. Okay, well, I think that we are reaching the very end of this very lively session. I say very lively because you put us a lot of questions in writing. We hope next time we'll receive also many more in person. Now, before we conclude, I would like to ask all of our three speakers, what are the takeaways? What are the warning signs? What are the red lines? Is there a magic pill? Is there a silver bullet to it all? So I would like to start with Alejandro first, and then Jörg, and then Ivana.
Okay, so for me, the main conclusion that I would, or the main message more than conclusion that I would like to give to the legislators is that for the future cohesion policy model, whatever model they decide, they have to be generous. Generosity will be the key for having a simple and flexible policy. We should avoid to create a lot of complex rules that, yes, they might give an ex-ante political message, but as we are seeing in the RRF, at the end they end up complicating the situation and adding in unnecessary layers of bureaucracy. So please consider this as my biggest warning. Then secondly, I would like to say that we in the European Court of Auditors, as I said, we are not policymakers, but we are the ones who have the information to analyze every model or policy in the Union. So please take our reports as a way to improve the future model and not as a way to kill or attack any of the policies. And finally, I would like to say that together we are stronger. So please, let's work together, institutions, legislators, and European Court of Auditors, in order to define a model that is helping all of us in the future.
This was indeed forward-looking, helping the EU run better. Together we're stronger, and I think we come back to your optimistic note that you gave us in the beginning.
Yes.
Very well. Thank you very much, Alejandro. Jörg.
Thank you very much, Damian. I would like for the audience to take home the following message. We are living currently in a highly unpredictable world, and the EU needs to make the most out of its resources, now more than ever. The RRF was set up to help the EU economies become more resilient. But this must not be done at the expense of performance, transparency, and accountability, as this can backfire, eroding the citizens' trust in the EU spending. As auditors, we are here to help the EU run better. This is also a fundamental reason for coming up with this recent review. EU policymakers now have a unique opportunity to draw the lessons from the RRF when designing the future instrument based on performance rather than cost. But just a simple copy-paste is definitely not an option.
That's very clear. So don't press on the copy-paste button going forward. Very clear. Ivana, what would be your final remark?
Yes, now out of our discussion, I think that the most important, and many of you mentioned during this slide of questions, partnership. So when we design policies, we really have to take into account partnership and this bottom-up and top-down approach. But bottom-up is also very important, that what we set that we would like to finance is something what comes out of the needs and what comes out of what can be achieved at different levels in the European Union. So this working together, being together, cooperate closely together is extremely important and the basic factor for success of each and every program, instrument, policy. Then also, when we think about this change going to performance, I already said, so in this thinking, we should, of course, reflect on what is our aim, what we want to achieve and how. And this is something what always has to be linked to the needs. And I think that it is very important when we create one instrument and policy area that all our citizens, SMEs, non-profit organization, youth organization, social organization related to social policy, that they have to be able to see themselves in that policy and what are opportunities for them and what are the key messages for them, what is expected from them to be achieved, but that they also have a say in a way that they say what they can and what they would like to achieve. So this is something and when we think about simplification, that we always think on how to simplify procedures for them. They are the most important, not us administration, but they. But I think if we simplify it for them, then it will be simplified also for us.
Thank you very much, Ioana. Thank you very much also, Jörg, before. Thank you very much, Alejandro here. And thank you very much, everyone who has been with us over the last 2 hours. We started close to 500. We're now still going strong with some 350, which is a very good testament to your endurance. So we hope that you have received valuable information. We will, of course, keep an eye on the developments. We will publish a review on the opportunities for post-2027 MFF later today. And on Thursday, we will publish a review on the future of EU cohesion policy, which Alejandro was also alluding to before. So definitely worth watching this space. Please make sure you're also signed up to our newsletter, which you can find on our website, so you can stay in touch with us. On this note, thank you very much, everybody. ECA over and out.
Thank you.
Thank you.